Hey friends, we are here, me and Bogle. You know Bogle? Have you met Bogle yet? And we're back with Dr. Dan Reidenberg, the executive director of Save. You remember him from last year. I know all of you remember Dr. Dan. And if you haven't, it's true. It's true. And if you haven't met Dr. Dan, this is Dr. Dan. Dr. Dan, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be the executive director of Save. Yeah.
I'm actually with that awareness. I have been with this since its beginnings. We are now over 30 years old, which makes me pretty darn old. But I've been running this organization for about 20 years. We were all volunteer run at the very beginning by a good friend of mine who lost her stepdaughter to suicide back in the late 1970s. It was a time when it really unlike it is today, where people just didn't talk about suicide. I mean, barely did people talk about mental health issues or depression. And they never spoke publicly about suicide. And the original goal was, could we find a way to get people to talk about this? And how can we do it in a way that people understand it? In the very early days, there were only a few research studies out about this topic. And we needed a way to translate that. And that's one of the things that I specialize in, is translating the science and the research into things that help make things practical and that get used all over the world. So we have been growing and growing ever since. We are a global organization. I train people all over the world. I work as a consultant for the World Health Organization, on the board of the International Association for Suicide Prevention, as well as running Save. And I'm just awesomely excited to be here and part of this. And thank you to you, everybody, for being here today.
And we are so excited to have you back. Bogle? Why are you muted? Okay, hang on.
That's my bad.
Oh, okay.
Well, so you've talked about how Save got started a little bit. Have you? That means I understand this correctly, right? You've been with Save since the beginning?
Yeah, I was a friend of the woman I was mentioning who lost her daughter to suicide, and we used to go to all these health fairs together. And the original goal was just, could we start talking about suicide? And Save has evolved over time. Not unlike this game that you are participating in. When I was in high school, we played and we rolled dice. You guys are doing it on screen live and interacting. But Save has evolved. We've gone through this evolution of, could we just talk about suicide, get a message out about it? We were running support groups. We were one of the first groups to ever think of doing some kind of support system for people who have lost someone to suicide. We then evolved into doing things in schools and trying to do presentations and raise awareness among students, a little bit among teachers, but really it was around students. We thought that getting to the youth was really the best approach. Then we moved into public awareness, which was really broad-scale messaging. We were the first organization to do actually billboards that were seen all over the country here in the United States. For suicide prevention. First in the world to ever do that. We're the largest organization in the world still today that does public messaging. And that's really broadened now too. So it's not just billboards, but radio ads, television ads, digital ads that you see that come up on your phone and on your computers. We do all kinds of advertising, where we talk about bus stops or sides of cabs and taxis. print ads, everything around public messaging to help people better understand this topic. We've not only done research on it and we help many people around the world develop public awareness campaigns because it's really hard to do safely. So we've really kind of evolved over time what we've done, and really gone into some specialty areas, not just around messaging, but we have a program that's an evidence-based program. And for those of you who don't know, an evidence-based program is a program that has to meet the highest level of scientific rigor, a p-value of 0.05. And there's only 20 of them in the world and only 3 that are for schools. And we developed one of those. It took us many, many years. It's a program called LEADS, which is Linking Education and Awareness of Depression and Suicide. So we've really moved from just could we have these small conversations about suicide and could we help survivors, this broad scale organization that does all kinds of things. And we can get to some of the newer things that we've been doing a little bit later, but we've really evolved over time.
You mentioned safe messaging. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so safe messaging is something I've talked to some of the people that are participating in this, and then also sent out some emails about to others. I wrote the best practices for media reporting on suicide, and that's the foundational guide that's used in this country and in fact around the world on how to message and talk about suicide safely. So for example, oftentimes the media will sensationalize a suicide, or they'll glorify the topic of suicide, or maybe somebody who died by suicide. So, for example, they might talk about all the great things that happened in somebody's life that died by suicide. And while we know that that's true, those that we have lost to suicide, and for all of you that are here with us right now and that are participating, or that may watch a recording of this, let me assure you that my heart goes out to you. I have lost 6 patients of mine to suicide. I lost a good friend of mine to suicide, a family member to suicide. It is hard, and it changes us forever. For those of you that have thought about suicide, maybe attempted suicide on your own, I know the struggles. We hear this all the time. And yet, trying to communicate those things is very difficult without risking contagion. Contagion or copycat suicide is when the wrong message gets put out and somebody feels more inclined towards suicide. So if going back to this example, we have a lot of messages that go out that say, somebody who died by suicide, they were the head of this or the leader of that, or they were doing great at all of this and nobody saw it coming. Everything is positive, and yet we know that those that we lose to suicide, not everything is great. Not everything is going perfect in their life, or we wouldn't have lost them. Something is wrong. Now, oftentimes there's a mental health component to it, not always, but most of the time. But when you're doing well in life, you're not thinking about suicide, attempting suicide, or definitely not dying by suicide. So we know something bad's happening. And when we only tell one side of the story, we don't tell anything about the struggles that they had, the challenges that they faced, the obstacles, then we mislead the public into better understanding what suicide is. Suicide is a very, very complex problem. Other things that happen in safe messaging is, for example, we'll hear people talking about a method of suicide. They will go into great details about the suicide and very specifics. And when those messages go out, for some people, they're really at risk. They're really struggling. And that adds fuel to the fire. And that lends them down that path. And so we have to be really careful. We have to give a balanced perspective. We don't want to make things bigger than they are. We don't want to give too many details. These are all things that go into what are the best practices for safe messaging.
That sounds great. There's so much more, I think, that comes with that, and that we need to keep track of and take into account than I think a lot of people think and are aware of.
It's really true. One of the things that is really, really hard for those of us that have lost someone to suicide has to do with this safe messaging around memorials or tributes or legacies. And this is really hard for people to grasp, but we have to tell it to people all the time. I tell it to schools, I tell it to workplaces, I tell it to families all the time. When we remember that person, we want to remember them and we want to honor them. What we don't want is for us to get into memorializing them. When we get into memorializing someone who's died by suicide, we increase risk to other people. What happens is that we take somebody who's struggling. They might have depression or bipolar disorder, or anxiety disorder. They might have something going on, and they're really struggling. And then all of a sudden, somebody they know dies by suicide, or maybe it's a celebrity or somebody that they really look up to, and they die by suicide. So now they're hit with this loss, and they start to over-relate. They're like, this is a person I looked up to. This is a person I admired. And if they couldn't make it, how am I going to make it? And so when we see this memorialization, this outpouring of grief, this over response to grief, and this long-lasting tribute where we can't let it go, and we've got to keep it going, and we've got to keep everybody connected to it, constant, over and over and over again, some of those people are really vulnerable, and they say to themselves, I'm going to get that too. If I just take my life, then I'm going to get that same exact response. And so it leads them down that path. So we have to help people understand how to balance that. Yes, we want to pay tribute to those that we've lost. It is horrible. It rips us apart, rips families apart, schools apart, communities apart when we lose someone. The unending question of why, what happened, how come they didn't reach out to us, what could I have done? All of these things happen, but we got to balance that out to make it safe for everybody who's really struggling.
Got a question from chat here real quick. Dr. Dan, with the external factors of the pandemic and the variety of emotional, financial, etc. stressors that have resulted in increased suicide rates, can you speak to how / if that has impacted SAVE's approach and methods?
Oh, it's a pertinent question. It's a top of mind for everybody that works in this field, and it is for SAVE. Really, over the last 2 years since the pandemic hit, we've had to retool, reshape how we do suicide prevention. So, for example, when we used to go into schools and do suicide prevention training in schools, we'd go meet with the teachers and we'd do these trainings and workshops for teachers or administration in schools on how to work with them so they could recognize what students might be at risk and how to talk to them and what to do to keep them safe. We'd go to schools and we'd talk to youth and we'd help them understand if they're struggling or if their friends are struggling, how to not keep secrets. We'd go into hospitals and we'd train doctors on how to talk to patients who might be at risk of suicide. But the pandemic comes along and we can't go those places any longer. In my city, I live in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, in the United States. And COVID is still really, really rough. Although things are getting better, COVID is still pretty rough. All the hospitals in the state of Minnesota are on a code red status. A code red status, when it comes to public health, means that those hospitals don't allow visitors, so there's no visitors for the patients. But what it also means is that nobody from the outside can go into the hospitals and do training. And none of the people that do the outreach in the hospitals to the communities can go out and do trainings in the communities. So we can't go in the hospitals and train the doctors, and we can't train the people that are in the hospitals. They're going to go out and do the work in the community. So yes, the pandemic has really hit us in a lot of different ways in being able to rethink how do we do suicide prevention. Obviously, for example, we've done a lot more online training, a ton of Zoom trainings and Teams trainings and things like that. Around the world, they've been doing these trainings for the last 2 years. It's not ideal, because the truth is that we have a lot of people that don't pay attention when they're on a Zoom training, and it's really hard to talk about these topics when you're not in the room with people. And when you're in Zoom, one of the features, I don't know if anybody here is connected to Zoom, but when you're presenting in Zoom, you can't see the chat.
Yeah.
You can't see what's happening and what the incoming is. You're just looking at your slides on a screen. The other thing that makes it really hard is when we do trainings, we do skill-based components. We know that the research tells us is that just providing education is good, and that does help. But when you're training, you've got to add a skill-based component in, and skill-based is trying to get people to interact and to work together and to figure out how to do an assessment and how to respond appropriately. That's really hard in Zoom and Teams. Now, trust me, over the last few years, they've evolved and allowed for different ways to do that and do breakout groups. It's better than it was, not ideal. Some of the other things that we've really tried to do is figure out how to get into communities in a different way. This is a perfect example of trying to reach a different community in a different way. And what I mean by that is we've got to reach people that we otherwise wouldn't have access to, all of you, and do it in a way that's fun. So we can provide some education, we can provide some information, we can provide some resources, and let you be the eyes and ears for us. You become an army for us in ways that we couldn't have before. So it used to be that there was a lot more hands-on kinds of things that were happening pre-pandemic. Now everybody's really shifted to this other approach. We've had to do research differently during the pandemic because we couldn't, for example, doing focus groups. We're trying to develop a universal message for suicide prevention that can be used around the world so that you can say a certain phrase or word, or you can see an image and you'll connect it with suicide and you won't be afraid of it. It won't be a stigmatized thing. So over the last, I've been working on this for 5 years. In the last 2 years, we've been trying to do these focus groups around the world. We have 12 countries around the world where we have people ready to do this. But we've had to try to figure out how to do it online rather than typically do focus groups in person. So everything has really shifted to online technology, online research in the age of COVID.
One more quick question from chat from Arnie. How do we reflect on someone who we admire, who lost their life to suicide, with continuing to glorify it?
Without continuing to glorify it. I've been thinking about this question so much, and I find this a very difficult one.
Well, it's been important to us because we decided this year that we wanted to leave an opportunity for people to remember our friends and family who aren't with us anymore. So, we did reach out to Dr. Dan to come up with like a list, like a guideline so that we could stay within that. But I'm going to let you take that one away.
Yeah, I mean, this is hard. So think of Robin Williams. Think of Anthony Bourdain. Think of Kate Spade. You can think of celebrity after celebrity after celebrity, right? And celebrities, they hold a different role for us in life, right? We look up to them. They're esteemed in our life. And you think of somebody like that, they've got all the money in the world. They could get all the help that they wanted. They could go to any treatment center. They have all the family and friends, whereas a lot of other people are isolated. And here's where this balancing piece comes out. They are people just like you and I. They're just like us, and they suffer and they struggle just like we do. And so for whether it's somebody who's a celebrity or it's our brother, our sister, our father, our kids, our friends, ultimately we're all people. We're all human. We all feel emotions in different ways, and our brain works and it makes us think different things, and our bodies do different behaviors as a result of that. When we lose somebody who's really esteemed like that, and we look up to them and we say, how could they have taken their life? We have to boil it down to understand that no matter how much money they had, no matter how much fame or fortune that they had, they were still just like us. They hurt just like us. They're sensitive just like us. And these illnesses, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder, personality disorders, they all impact them just like they impact all the rest of us. It's really no different. So we've got to bring them down to the same level as we are. Doesn't matter how much money or fame they have. The other thing that really gets us is that when we lose somebody like that, right, and we think, if it could happen to them, there's no way I'm going to survive, as opposed to if it's our friend, right, who maybe doesn't have a lot of money, we never saw it coming, we thought we knew them really well. You don't really know celebrities, right? I mean, you know what they portray, what movie they're in, what songs they sing, but you know your friends. And then you get blindsided by a friend or a family member who takes their life, or even attempts to take their life. It really shakes us to the core in a very different way. Ultimately, the reality here is that we're all the same. These illnesses, they don't pick us based on how much money we have. They don't pick us based on where we live. They don't pick us based on what color hair we have. They don't pick us based on what gender we are, what sexual orientation we are, what age we are. These illnesses are brain illnesses, and they take over the brain, they take over the body, and they don't care if you're famous or if you've got a lot of money.
Yeah. It's tricky, and some of these causes can be so invisible that's what makes it tricky. I like what you said about not seeing it coming, and I think that is something that a lot of people can feel very guilty about. But it sometimes is impossible, I think.
So I'm really glad you picked up on that. So let me just mention a thing about this. We hear this all the time. Never saw it come. We had no idea. They had no warning signs. So let me give you a stat first. We know that in reality, about 80 to 90% of the time, there are warning signs. The problem is that most of us don't see them because we're not trained on what to look for. Most of us don't see them because the people that are struggling don't give them out to us, and they say, hey, I got this warning sign that I'm going to kill myself tomorrow. This is what I'm going to do. They don't tell us that. They're not that clear about it. The brain literally won't allow them to say the right words to us, so we don't get the warning signs. A third thing, why we hear this all the time where we never saw it coming. We know that they give out warning signs, but they don't give them all out to one person. They give out one little one here, one little one there, one little one over here. Sometimes they do some online. And there's never anybody that is able to put together the whole puzzle and see it all for what it really is. So the brain that is really struggling, it really hurts. Goes through this process of being well to becoming ill to really struggling to getting to this place of suicide. As it goes through that process, it gets very distorted. Suicide isn't really a logical process. As a matter of fact, if we look at the notes that people leave us, and most people don't leave notes. Only about 20 or 25% of people that leave us notes. It doesn't help us understand why they're gone. Even though they say, do this, or this is how I feel, this is what I want to have happen, please forgive me, and it all sounds very logical. You're still left looking at that note saying, wait a minute, they should still be here. If they would have just talked to me, I'd be able to get them through that. So logic escapes them as they get sicker and sicker and closer to death. And as that logic goes away, it doesn't give us a formulated, straightforward path as to, here's the person who's going to die. And so we often hear, there was no sign, and we missed it. It takes us about 6 months or a year after we've lost someone for family members and friends to start putting the pieces together.
Yeah. You've mentioned leads, and we've talked about how SAFE has handled the challenges that the pandemic brings to what they're doing. Can you talk maybe about something? Is there specifically something that you feel like, as an organizational accomplishment of SAFE, of yourself, that you are most proud of, that like really springs to mind?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanted to talk about things that I'm really proud of. I'm proud of the LEADS program because it's an evidence-based program and there's very few of them. It takes a long time and it's really hard to do to get an independent evaluator to look at a program that's done in a way that meets that level of scientific rigor. We created a program that's called Peer Connections. You can find it on our website at save.org. And Peer Connections is an online support program for people that are struggling. So if you think of AA, somebody that's struggling, they might be afraid of relapse, or they're in recovery and they need somebody to talk to. We created a program. It's the first of its kind anywhere in the world where it's an online connection. So if you're struggling, you can go onto our platform, sign in, and you can scroll through a list of people that can be a peer mentor, a peer supporter for you. And you can talk to them. You can outreach to them. And we've designed it so that you can reach out any way you want. And you can be anywhere in the world. You can be in Japan or Australia. You can be in the Netherlands. You can be anywhere in the world and connect to somebody any place else. Or if you are somebody who's a survivor, you've been through this before, you've got lived experience, and you want to provide support to somebody else, you can go on and you can register and you can say, I'm here if somebody needs somebody to talk to. This program we have never one time advertised for. As a matter of fact, we have never publicly told anybody that this program exists. And yet, every single week, more and more people are signing up to be part of this, both as the peer supporters and as people that are looking for help. This is all going organically. What that tells me is that there's this tremendous need out there for people to connect with each other. That's a really cool program that we're doing. Another thing that we're doing is we have this new construction industry program. The construction industry program is reaching over 7 million people in the United States. This is really the first of its kind program ever. And this program has a series of videos that people in the construction industry can watch. We have training that we've been doing for people like HR managers and employee benefits managers and all the people that are kind of mid-level. And then we're doing training for the owners of companies. It's a very unique program reaching millions of people. And just last week, we actually got outreach by some people in the UK saying, hey, we heard about this program. We really want to try to expand it around the world. So we're taking these kind of novel approaches to what we've done. And this is filling in that pandemic piece, right? We can't get everywhere, so let's create some video training modules. And let's find other ways to get this information out there in a broad way. And it's going global, really, for all the different things that we're doing.
Got another question in chat here. Dr. Dan, I sometimes struggle even when reaching out because sometimes I feel I am annoying. Even though I know and understand the people that surround me are very supportive. If I begin to slip and this feeling and thoughts of being annoying kicks in, what should I or can I do?
I feel this question very personally, honestly, before you answer. I probably spent over a decade not mentioning what turned out to be my persistent depression disorder with that exact feeling. And even when things got really bad, like that idea of, okay, today I'm going to talk to someone about it today, and then still not doing it because there was always that voice that kept me from doing it. And it's really tough to break through that. So yeah, very good question.
Thank you for sharing that. And not only is this event, but it is exact examples just like that of people just like everybody else that's participating in this hearing that somebody else they can relate to has done this. They've taken the step and they've said, I want to do this. You did it just now, right? You shared and you've broken through that stigma and said, I don't need to be ashamed of this. I can do this. Here's the thing about when we're struggling. If you were struggling and you had a headache, it was just a headache, right? One that you could keep working at, keep going to school, do whatever you were going to do. You probably wouldn't tell anybody about it, right? You might grab some Tylenol, over-the-counter medicine, take it, maybe get some caffeine in you, and go on with your day. Nobody would know any different, right? And hopefully that headache would go away. However, if that headache got worse and worse, and it got to the place where you were really struggling at work, or you were really struggling to engage with people that you're living with or you're talking with, and somebody started to pick up on something's wrong, they might ask you about it. They need you to be able to say, hey, I'm having a really bad time. My headache is really, really out of sorts. Now, maybe it's just a migraine headache, and that's a pretty bad thing, right? And we might need to treat that with prescription medications. We might need to get you some help beyond just the over-the-counter stuff. You need to let somebody in on that message because we also don't want it to be, it could be worse. It could be a tumor. It could be something. It could be a stroke that you might be having. If we don't tell somebody about that headache that's really kind of impairing our daily life, that headache that is impacting our ability to function, we're at risk. And these illnesses we're talking about, depression, anxiety, it's the same kind of thing. You might be able to handle it, most of the time. You probably don't have to tell somebody all of the time. But there are times when you reach that place where it's really important to say to somebody else, hey, something's going on here, and I don't know what it is. I'm just not feeling right, or something is out of sorts for me. And if you're talking to somebody, if you're worried about somebody, here's the most important thing you can do. Trust your gut. if there's somebody in your life you know that doesn't seem well, seems off in the way that you know them, is out of character for them, ask the question. Because as I was mentioning, as the brain gets sicker and sicker, it literally closes off our ability to get those words out. So as you're talking about, Bogle, it's very hard for us to say, hey, you know what? I had this thought that, today could be it for me. If one more thing happens, I can't take it. Brain literally can't get that thought out of our mouths. So we've got to be able to ask people what's going on if we think something's wrong. But early on, when you're starting to struggle, open up, share. You may find go back to this question real specifically. Pick some people that you know and you trust, and establish with them when you're well, when things are going really well. Hey, I've got this, happens to me every once in a while. It's not happening to me right now, but, sometimes I get in a bad place. And if there is, I just want to make sure that it's okay if I reach out to you. Just set up a check-in point, right? Just somebody else that you know can be available, and all you have to do is trigger that and say, hey, today's one of those days for me. Let them take it from there. Let them lead it. You just listen. You just respond. You just participate in that. If we don't open up these forms of dialogue, just like Bogle just did, if we don't have people willing to step out and say, something's wrong, this is when we lose people. We lose people because they're so afraid to say, something isn't right in my head. Most of the time, when they're at that place, we can still get them help. It's when they've moved beyond it. Let me give you an example. We know, for example, in many countries around the world, there are crisis lines. There's lifelines. You can call and you can talk to somebody. We know that when people are in real distress, they will call the lifeline. However, they get to a place beyond that, they won't call anymore. And then we lose them. This is why when people are struggling early on, we got to get them to talk about it. So take the chance. Set up some things early. Give people a little word that you can just say one word to them, or just one number, or whatever it is that clues them in that you're not in a good place. Engage in that dialogue and get through the fear and the stigma, because it could save your life.
This is a thing that I do with my wife, because we live in the same house. She knows me pretty good, but we do, we check in. And there was a point, 4 or 5 years ago where I was like, I think it's time for some kind of medication because I'm not doing so hot. And we've been able to work through that, and then things in my life changed and I was able to adjust medications and whatnot. But having somebody that you can talk to, that you trust, it's very, very important.
There's a couple. There's one other piece I want to add to this. So having people, somebody that you can rely on, that you can go to, you can check in on, is really great. Two things to know about that. One is it should be more than one person, because one person can't always be available, right? So say maybe you have somebody who's really good in the mornings, but they're not good in the afternoons. You want to have somebody who's good at both times, because when it hits you, you may need one of those different people. That's one thing. The other thing is it's really important for all of us to kind of know where our limit is, right? So if we can figure out on a scale of 0 to 10 or 1 to 10 how we're doing. And if we try certain things that aren't working, we keep moving up that scale, that tells us, hey, now it's really time to talk to somebody else. So early on, it might be, hey, I'm not feeling so great. I'm gonna read a book for a little bit. Or I'm gonna play this game for a little bit. And if that doesn't work, okay, I'm gonna go listen to music. I'm gonna chill out. I'm gonna watch this movie, listen to music, whatever it is. That doesn't work. Okay, now we're at a 4 or we're at a 5. Now might be time just to check in with somebody and just say, how we doing? And we may not even disclose anything. We just want to make sure we have a human-to-human connection right now. You get beyond a 5 into a 6, now you really need to make sure that somebody knows what's going on. This is that migraine. This is not the stroke. This is the migraine. This is the place where we want to make sure that somebody else knows that something's going on for us, because things can get very cloudy for us and very, very diffuse in terms of, can we slip too far and then we can't say it anymore? Let somebody check in on us.
So that's something we're going to touch on here in the last 15 minutes is, because we do have constant connection when you're watching streams and streaming and being a part of a community. And we're definitely going to touch on that here in a minute. Bogle, you want to go with the next one?
Yes. Arnie had another question in chat that I found particularly interesting, specifically because I do not have any reference point to it. Arnie says, I know that the military utilizes a spectrum to evaluate your mental health. And he's wondering if SAVE utilizes something similar to help others, or if
Oh
that
man,
rings a bell.
it's sort of it's amazing somebody asked that. Thank you for that question. Just about a month ago, it's taken about a year, just a little over a year, but I just created a new Saves Mental Health Continuum, and there are mental health continuum that are out there. We developed kind of a unique one. I'm not saying that ours is any better than any other, so I don't want to say that. Ours is just as good as others. Ours is just a little different. Ours takes there's some research on these mental health continuums that we've tried to incorporate that most of the other mental health continuums haven't done. So our mental health continuum allows for the fact that you can be doing really well in life and still have a mental health challenge. Most of the mental health continuums don't do that. They're on polar opposites, right? So you're doing really, really well, you're doing okay, you start to struggle, and you're in a really bad place. Ours says, hey, you can actually be doing pretty well and still need mental health involvement, even if it's preventive mental health involvement. So that's this kind of spectrum approach. It's kind of like, how do we look at whole person care and say, we can all be doing well and still need things. You're going to be in a relationship. You might need to talk with a counselor about how you navigate just conflict. And so things are going well. Nobody's struggling with an illness, but you might want to take preventive approaches to build on a relationship. You might have challenges. You and your spouse, your partner might be doing really well, but you have problems with a child, problems with family members. So we take that whole spectrum approach and we say you can have an illness anywhere along the line. There's things we can do, all even in the good places, but also in the bad places. The other piece around this kind of continuum approach is that one of the things that we really struggle with in our field is how to do these assessments, risk assessments, and how do we say who's really at risk and who's really not at risk. As a matter of fact, the largest research studies that have been done around the world, these meta-analyses studies, have shown that if we just look at risk factors, what puts somebody at greater risk of dying by suicide, they're not going to tell us if somebody's actually going to die. If I were to say, pick a 18-year-old whose parents are divorced and one parent is drinking all the time, the other's using drugs, it's a guy and he just lost his job and he just lost his girlfriend, he's got no money, and he's really struggling. That guy, he's the guy who's going to die by suicide. We'd be wrong most of the time. So we've spent all of this time looking at risk factors in the spectrum of health. We've looked just at risk factors, and we've put a little bit of time into what's called protective factors. These are the buffers. These are the things that keep us from dying by suicide. So like connections and access to care, like healthcare, things like that. We haven't spent a lot of time on that. We need to do a full spectrum approach. We need to look at everything that's involved in somebody's life and look at whole person care, not only along the whole continuum, when you're well to when you're ill, but everything that's involved in somebody's life, risk factors, protective factors, warning signs. We also need to look at things like, what are triggers? Because if somebody is really struggling, but there's no trigger there, they may not need to go to a hospital. They may not even need care. So that's this whole spectrum approach that needs a lot more attention rather than just focusing on who might be at risk of suicide.
Okay. You want to tie, Artyom, shall we tie the question in chat to
Yeah, let's do that.
what we wanted to talk about? So we wanted to bring up myths and misinformation regarding suicide, and related to that is a question in chat. I think when someone makes regular suicide threats, at what point do you evaluate whether there is manipulation versus distress, and how do we support an individual who's communicating that? I think that can tie in.
This is a big one, and I've over the past
it's
year.
a tricky one. I find this very difficult.
And I've had a lot of people, after the last Save&Raid come to me and ask me specifically on that, and it's very hard to answer because there just isn't. But yeah, go take that one away.
Yeah,
it's,
like my
it's a struggle.
My instinct is always to take that sort of thing seriously, but you also don't want to drag yourself down by.
You have to look out for yourself too.
Yeah, as well. Yeah.
So that's exactly right. All of that is exactly right. First of all, we need to make sure exactly what you just said. That the suicidal thinking, the suicidal behavior, whatever it is, the illness that somebody's struggling with doesn't take us down too. We got to have a really good boundary so that we don't get sucked into it. It's no different than in families where there's alcoholism. Alcohol can be used by one person, but the disease can take the whole family down.
Mm-hmm.
But suicide can do the same thing to a family. It can make people feel like they have to walk around on eggshells. They can't talk about it. They can't say things about it. They can't do the things they normally would do. So we got to have some pretty clear boundaries about that. Before we get to the myths, let's get back to this other question that came in on the chat. Is there manipulation involved? We can't say no that there isn't, because sometimes there is. Sometimes people will throw this out there just to get attention. What I will tell you is that if we look at the research on this, it is very, very few people that will do it. We have people that will do it a lot, but most of the people that are struggling don't throw it out there just as a game. When we teach parents and we teach kids in school, we teach educators and doctors to pay attention to this. What we teach them to do is, if somebody throws that out there and says, "Oh, you know what, I'm just done. I'm going to go kill myself over what you just said," we say, "Stop everything right now." Turn to that person, you look them in the eye, and you say, "Look, if this is what's really going on for you right now, I'm here. I'm not leaving. We're going to get you to the care that you need. Because I need you to be here. I want you to be here. You have to stay. We're going to get you the help." Now, if it's not what's going on for you, we're still going to get you some help, because you shouldn't be throwing that out there. And don't use that again, because every single time you say that, I'm going to stop. I don't care if I'm driving down the road. I don't care what we're doing. I'm going to stop, because that's how important this is.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that you're going to have to readjust your whole life. It just means for that moment when somebody throws that out there, we've got to either really address it and take it really seriously, just like you said, or we've got to redirect them to a different coping skill. So that's where that's leading me. Sometimes we get some people that use suicide as a coping skill. They develop this mechanism to say whenever there's a problem, that's what they go to. That's what they rely on. And so they throw it out there. They say it. Doesn't mean they attempt or they try or they write it down. They just throw it out there that that's their coping mechanism. We have to help them understand that's not a healthy coping mechanism. It's one they may have developed, but we need to give them other ways to cope when they're faced with a distress. Other ways to cope when something's triggering something emotionally inside of them. But to be able to do that, we've got to get them to stop at that moment. So you've got to stop, address it, and either get them to the help they need if it's really a crisis. If it's not, redirect them and say, "That's not what's really going on. Let's develop a different kind of coping skill for you." That's going to take me back to that piece about myths and misperceptions. Many people think that this is true, that if somebody says it, there's nothing you can do. If they say, if that's what they want, they're going to do it and you can't intervene. We know that's not true. We know there's a lot of people that will say it, and we can intervene. We can get them to help. We can save them. As a matter of fact, we've just talked about this. We want people to say it because it's the only way for us to know that we need to get them some help. Another myth, that only people that have a mental health issue die by suicide. And to say it in a way that used to be very stigmatized, only crazy people kill themselves. That's not true. We know people that are not crazy or don't have a mental health issue die by suicide. Most people do, but not everybody does. Another misperception is that if somebody is already in the process of doing it, you can't stop them. Of course you can still stop them. You want to intervene as fast as possible. Misperception that suicide happens more around the holidays. That's a myth. Most people think that there's more suicides in November and December than any other months of the year. Truth is, November and December have the lowest number of suicides of all the months of the year. The lowest number.
Is that because that's the time of the year? Sorry, I just had a thought in my head. That's the time of the year that people reconnect with each other the most and find out about it?
In part, yes. It's when we have people connecting. People are actually together more, and so they might see somebody struggling, or they might be able to take care of themselves and get the help that they need to get through that time. Now, we know it starts to increase again in January and February, but the months where we see the most number of suicide is April and May. This is oftentimes when people are getting ready to graduate, things are ending, things are transitioning for them, seasons are changing, but April and May is the first highest month, and then we have August and September, the second time period when we see lots and lots of suicides. That's a myth. And so there's all these myths out there about what suicide is and who dies by suicide. Let me give you another one. Most people think that youth are the ones who die by suicide the most. Now, around the world, suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people. It's the second leading cause of death for young people because most young people are not dying. Most young people live. But when they do die, they die by suicide. But if we actually break down age groups and we take young people, we take middle-aged adults, and we take senior citizens, youth are the lowest number of people that are dying. They're the lowest number. It's really adults and seniors that die more often. It's just that the young people get more attention paid to them. There's this greater grief and outpouring of support for them. So there's all these myths and misperceptions. Part of what we do at Save is to try to dispel some of those things. Let me give you the last one, and it's one we already touched on, but it's worth repeating. If you talk about suicide's going to lead somebody down that path, it is not going to lead somebody down that path. It can only if you do it in an unsafe way. If you encourage somebody, if you support somebody, first of all, it's illegal. But if you try to get them to do it, not only is it illegal, but yes, that can do it. But just by if you're worried about somebody and you don't know what to do, and you're afraid if you ask them, hey, you're not doing so well. You're not thinking about dying. You're not thinking about just checking out, are you? Absolutely ask that question. We have a lot of research from around the world that says you can ask the question. It isn't going to hurt them. In fact, the research tells us that it lowers their level of anxiety. It connects where their brain is at. So those are a lot of myths and misperceptions that are out there.
And we're heading towards the end. We got about 10 minutes left, and there's something that I really wanted to touch on by the end of this. And Valkyrie Fox, this is going to hopefully be the answer that you're looking for to your question. So Twitch has an amazing community, and we, as content creators and other community members, even as viewers, like, there is reach. We're, constantly interacting with people that we've never met. And in some ways, we're finding out more about them than we would if it was somebody, in our hometown. Right? With everything that's been going on from the pandemic and, what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, I think we're all feeling a lot more stress than we're used to. So knowing all that's going on, so I think I just paraphrased the thing that I was going to read out loud, but how, as streamers, can we support people I'm going to ask a couple questions. How can we support people best in crisis? What are the 1 to 3 best things that we can have available in our bookmark bar, ready to go when we need them, when somebody in crisis comes to us or we feel like we need to talk to somebody? And answer that, and then I got one more question at the end. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to go with the last one first. What do you need to bookmark? Save.org. Bookmark our website so you have it. The warning signs are on there. The resources are on there. We have international resources. We have suggested readings on there. We have ways to ask the question. We have the resources right there for us. So you want to have Save. You want to also have something local wherever you live. I know we've got people here from Australia, we've got people in Canada, we've got people in the Netherlands, we've got people around the world that are part of this. Find a local resource that can get you connected to care. So if you know somebody who's struggling, you can give them that resource. One of the things that we know that happens is that when somebody is really struggling, they feel like nobody will understand. They feel like there's no place for them to turn. They feel like they can't reach out for help. So they don't. If we can say, hey, here's a local resource, here's people that are willing to talk to you, you can go right here. That is an opening for them. It's a possibility. It's an option. That's what we're trying to do. Expand that. They get tunnel vision. We want to open it up by giving them a resource. So find one local resource, and I mean that very clearly, that it's one. We don't want to give somebody who's struggling 2, 3, 4 resources, because it becomes overwhelming to them. They're already just barely hanging on there. So we want to make sure that we give them one credible source, one phone number, or one website that they can go to if they're really struggling. So those are the kinds of things to bookmark and to know. Let's go back to that first question, which is, a huge platform, lots of people. What's the opportunity here? You have a tremendous opportunity. Social media, online technology, whether we're talking about Zoom, we're talking about Twitch, we're talking about Facebook, any of the other platforms you want to think about. Our world is interconnected this way. It's connected the way we're doing this right now. I've never met either one of you in person, and yet, I feel like I know you, and I feel like you've been open with me about things that have happened to both of you. I've shared with you about losses that we've had here. Look, if you were interacting with me and you kind of saw me and you were worried about me, you didn't think that I was interacting either at the same level, same energy, I was using the same words, or I wasn't looking well, I was all kind of disheveled and messed up. I hope you do something, right? And do something can be as simple as just send me a chat, send me a text, just reach out, just do anything. That's one of the greatest opportunities that these platforms provide. You've got this chat going on, which I can't watch right now, but I'll be watching later. I got it pulled up on my phone. You're worried about somebody? Check in with them. Checking in with people can save people's lives. We don't often think that, but it can be really simple. Sometimes it just jolts the brain into reality right here instead of reality of the darkness. So thinking about the people you're interacting with, they interact differently. Are they less available, less accessible? Are they not participating in activities as much as they used to? Did they all of a sudden go blank and silent on you? Maybe they're not showing their face anymore. Check in with them. Just find out what's going on. So that's one of the things that these platforms offer the opportunity with is an opportunity to check in and fairly innocuously. You don't have to be overly direct. You just, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? And this brings me to that broader question. How do you do this? What do you say? Really important. If you don't know what's going on for somebody, it's important to do 2 things. One is say, hey, I noticed something's different about you lately. And 2, what can I do? Always 2 components. You haven't seemed like yourself lately. How can I help? You've been really more distant lately. You haven't been engaged as much anymore. Can we chat? Always 2 parts, especially when you have no idea what's going on. So give them an observation of what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, and give them some feedback so that they know that they can be connected to someone. However, if you are worried about somebody, maybe somebody sent out a message, or maybe somebody talking really dark, maybe somebody else let you know that they've been connecting to somebody and they're really worried about somebody. Like I said earlier, ask the question. Don't be afraid to ask the question. You don't have to say, hey, you're gonna go commit suicide. You could say, hey, you're not feeling so well lately. You've been thinking about hurting yourself, or you just don't feel like you want to be around any longer. However you do it, get the question out. It could save their life.
Side note, Captain Peelcard just gifted you a subscription to my channel, so when you're hanging out in the other channels, if you hit the little smiley face at the bottom, you'll be able to use some of the emotes in chat.
That's awesome. And I thank the captain, the captain and I had a good conversation, like I've had with several of the others that are part of this. And look, everybody that's here has got a story. Everybody's got a story, and everybody's is different, but they're all hard, and we've all had them. Robert Williams had a story. Anthony Bourdain had a story. Everybody's had a story. It's important that we all share what our stories are, at least on some level, and we let people know that you're not alone out there. Still be able to have fun. That's what this is all about.
Chat is now, Cortland's chanting, one of us, one of us, one of us. Oh, I got one more question. Is there okay? So we've listened to the talk. We've been in the event. We're feeling inspired. Where can we go if we feel so motivated to find an online course to help us in talking to people in the community?
So again, you can go to save.org, and we can. There's text things on there about how to ask the question and what to do. We actually just finished a course that we made with an e-learning platform, and we just put it online, and it's available to people. We're selling it, but as I mentioned to you guys before we started this, I am happy to share with everybody, anybody who's part of the Save and Raid event. We will find a way to make that free and accessible to all of you. It's not very long. It's about 20 minutes, about 25 minutes. It's a basic Suicide 101. And again, it's on e-learning platform. And it's through our website. We will make that available to all of you, no cost. So we'll figure that all out afterwards. I don't know how to make that happen, but we'll figure out a way to make it happen. So if
We'll make it
people wanna
work.
know-
We'll make it work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And
People
Dr. Dan,
wanna
thank
learn
you
that.
so much for
That is amazing
Yeah.
and very well appreciated. I can already see people in chat going like, "Oh hell yeah, that's gonna be it's gonna be a game changer for some of us," and that's really great. So yeah, thank you for coming on. I actually have a question. Last year, you challenged us to do something that we managed to do. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you challenged us to raise a certain amount of money in a certain amount of time. Did you have an idea about something else that you would like to challenge us this year?
Yeah,
Have you
no,
thought about that?
it was great. It affected my pocketbook because you
put him on
guys
the
did
spot, Bogle.
it.
Sorry?
You guys did it last year, and it was really exciting. And I was happy and proud to write the check and make a donation to save on your behalf and on behalf of everybody who participated in this. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. I'm really thankful to everybody who's been involved, all the work that goes into all of this. All the thought that goes into it, and just everybody taking their time, their hours, and watching and participating, not just their slot, but all throughout this 40 some hours, 48 hours of activity, and I'm hoping we continue to go bigger and better. So yes, I am willing to do this again. I don't know. Do you know where we're at right now?
I want to be clear. I'm not trying to pressure you into donating anything. I just know these people and they're eager. They're video gamers. These are 93 people watching right now and they love a challenge. And I want to challenge them. And if it's coming from you, they'll listen harder than if it's coming from me. So that's why I brought that up. We are currently at 3,724 US dollars and 90 cents. So let's round that up to 3,725. That is what we are currently at. That is amazing.
That is really amazing. The $5, the $3, the $10, and $20, whatever it takes. Here's what I'll do. You guys get to $5,000 before the end of this, and I'll donate $500. I'll donate $500.
Oh, that is a deal.
Yes.
That is a deal.
I'll sweeten that deal.
Oh, we're leveling up.
I'll sweeten that deal. You guys get to $10,000 by the end, $10,000, and I'll donate $1,000.
Okay. That is.
Good challenge.
I mean,
everybody
we're gonna have to work for that. But
10K, let's go. 10K, let's go. Wee.
we're up to the challenge for sure.
Call your parents,
Okay.
call your siblings, call everybody
Yeah.
you work with.
Go your grand, call her dog.
Look, if everybody here can do a little bit more, and look, we're grateful for all that everybody's done already. It's amazing, and we have some exciting things that we're hoping to be able to do even next year with more incentives, more ideas, more people, and potentially some good news to come out of this. So we're looking forward to it. But yeah, let's go for the 5. and you'll get $500. I'll be watching the chat, and I know a little bit later we're off to a meeting now, but I'll be chatting in a little bit later.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for everything you do. I mean, you say thanks to us, but honestly, working with you has been like a dream come true. It's been an amazing experience, and I wouldn't want it any other way.
You know what? We're grateful. Linda, as you know, and you've worked with Linda in our office, we're deeply appreciative of this, of all of your time and all of your passion behind this. We believe that any hope that we can provide and that you can take out as that army for us could save somebody's life. And this event and what you're doing is not only fun, and it should be fun, and we want people to have fun. We want you to challenge yourself, not only with this game, but amongst yourselves. But talk about this. Talk about what you're doing. Talk about it with other people. That's going to spread the word. It's going to grow this. And I can promise you, from the work that we do, we know that this will touch somebody and this will save somebody's life. We cannot do this alone. We cannot see and be part of everyone's life that's here. You are arms and legs for us. Consider yourselves part of the Save family, each and every one of you. We value you, we appreciate you, and we do believe that this is saving lives. That's what Save&Raid is about. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. All right. So, Epic Android is ready to go with the next section of the game. So I'm going to go ahead and...
Can I take maybe a minute to give some attention to the people that have donated during this hour? I didn't want to do that during the interview, but I know Epic is waiting, and I mean, he can be mad at me. I don't think he will be. Thank you so much, Sigma957 Zippy, for that $69. Nice. Thank you, Horseway, for the 20, Matt Glad for the 50, Evalicia 25, Lilith Lums for the 10, an anonymous donation. Those are always very exciting, of $60. Thank you so much. Pern XXTV for the 10, Sigma again with the 20, Horseway again with the 10. Thank you all so much for donating. We're gonna get to that 5, and we're gonna work really hard for that 10. So yeah, let's raid Epic.
All right, awesome. Thank you again, everybody.
I'm ready.
Off there. Okay, I think it's just you and me now, or we're waiting for the raid to kick off, Bogle.
Yes.
Did
you kick Dr. Dan off the call?
I did not. He left. I just switched the scene over when I saw he did, because it was going to look kind of silly.
I was like, he was waving, and you were like, okay, we're raiding. Get out of here. Thanks, everyone in chat, for asking the questions. I hope we got to most of them. They were very insightful. Thank you also for everyone in chat helping other people with questions. It was, I was looking at a lot of stuff, and you're all very, very cool people.
Thank you, everybody, for being here and supporting the Save&Raid project and Dr. Dan hanging out with us. We love and appreciate every single one of you. All right, I'm going to hit that raid button now. We're going to go do that.
Let's do it.
And Bogle's going to go to bed. Night, Bogle.
I am going to go to bed.
That's right.
I'll see you all tomorrow.
Sounds good.